With blood and rage of crimson red, ripped from a corpse so freshly dead, together with our hellish hate, we'll burn you all. That is your fate.
This is Red Lantern Russell from
Tomes of Evil,
and you're listening to Sector 2814, a Green Lantern podcast.
In brightest day,
in blackest night,
no evil shall escape my sight.
But those who worship evil's might,
beware my power.
Green Lantern's light. Welcome back to Sector 2814, the Green Lantern podcast. You know me, Phil and Will, but that's not important tonight. Tonight, we have a very special guest, the man whose comics we've been talking for the last couple weeks at least, Mr. Ron Marz. Hello, sir.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, welcome.
Hey, yes. Thank you. All right. So, yeah, like we said, we're going to start with Green Lantern, so we figured we'd start at the beginning. If you could tell us, okay, what was the whole process behind, the whole thing with taking Hal Jordan out? Because there's your number one Hal Jordan fanboy right next to me. What was that whole decision-making process, and how much of like the Kyle Rayner stuff was you? How much was DC editorial?
Well, the decision-making process was DC saying, we're going to do this. Do you want to write it? Or in point of fact, DC saying, would you like to write Green Lantern? Sure. And then they said, well, this is what we're going to do. So the notion for what Emerald Twilight turned into was baked into the pie from the beginning. They knew that was going to be the storyline, gave me the basics of it, the very basics of it on a phone call late in the evening one night when I had actually just gotten off the train and gotten home from a trip into Marvel for the day, to talk about writing Thor. And I get a call from DC sort of later in the evening, and this is what came out of it. And then like the next day they sent me about a page and a half of notes, which was all the notes that existed for Emerald Twilight. This is what's going to happen in the 3 issues, and you make it up from there. And the last line of the notes, I suspect I still have the notes somewhere here in a filing cabinet still. But it basically said, and a new Green Lantern is created. And that was it. That was, there was no direction of who was going to be, what he or she was supposed to be like. There was just, here, go make it up. Which is obviously a fairly rare gift. It was rare back then. It's very rare now.
Had they already chosen the new artist? Because I feel like you and the new artist work really, really well together.
Yeah, Daryl Banks, who was my co-creator of Kyle Rayner and drew issue 50 of Green Lantern, last part of Emerald Twilight. Daryl was on the book, and he had actually started to draw issue 48 when issue 48, as it existed, was scrapped. New writer was brought in, me. And because the decision was made fairly late, there was no longer time for Daryl to draw 48, 49, and 50. So that's why 48, 49, and 50 all have different artists on them. Because they all basically had to be written at once. So once I agreed to do the gig and worked out more of the details of the story, I wrote a batch of issue 48, a batch of issue 49, and a batch of issue 50 to get everybody started. And then went back to finish off 48 and then 49 and then 50. So there are Daryl Banks pages I suspect I have those in the filing cabinet too, from the original issue 48. And obviously those are probably never going to see the light of day. But Daryl was the new guy in the book, and he was staying, and I was very happy with that because I thought Daryl's stuff was great. I had not seen his work before. Maybe I had seen it in a stray issue from DC, but I had not, really been familiar with his stuff because he was kind of just starting at DC. Do you know why they pulled the plug on 48 so late in the game, and what, and how much notice did you get that you're like, hey, you're writing 48? So, fairly late in the game, they decided that the storyline that was originally pitched for that, and they went back and forth and finally said, okay, let's do this. And then, to my knowledge, it went further up the chain at DC, further up the editorial chain, and they decided this is kind of more of the same. They decided that they didn't want to have a book with Hal as the lead character, whether he was called the Green Lantern or the Protector or whatever he was going to be called. The feeling was this book's not selling with Hal as the main guy, so let's do something different. So that
I'm sorry,
the plug got pulled, and in fairly short order, they came up with the very broad strokes of Emerald Twilight, and I'm fairly sure that I was the first guy they offered it to.
Well, and you had some experience with the editorial there because you had written several stories for the Core Quarterly book, I think, right?
Yeah, that was my introduction to DC. I started over at Marvel. Those were my first gigs, and then because editors at DC were reading my Surfer stuff at Marvel, I got a foot in the door there and wrote some Green Lantern Core Quarterly stories. Because that's basically how you, or at least in those days, that was how you introduced yourself to a publisher. Is you did 10-pagers, and it still works that way to a great extent now. Anthology stories, 10-pagers. You kind of cut your teeth on them and get to try out. And if you don't screw the pooch too bad, they maybe give you something else to do.
Nice.
And so basically all they told you is like, okay, you're gonna have one new Green Lantern. That's it. And basically, he has to have a Green Lantern power ring. Besides that, everything else was up to you.
Yeah, everything was kind of on the table, and I asked if the lead character could be a woman, and they said no, we'd rather have a male lead. And I asked if it needed to be an Earthling or could it be could it be an alien? And they said we want a human male. Other than that, there were no parameters. And they let me go off and kind of make up Kyle. And they let Daryl go off and make up Kyle's costume or do a number of costume variations, and then picked different pieces from some of the different designs to say, well, would this part work with this part? And sort of the second iteration of pulling some designs together is exactly how Kyle turned out in the book. And I just kind of made up Kyle from basically wanting to have, feeling like that if Hal was not going to be the main character anymore, if there was a desire to move in a different direction, let's not do a guy who was kind of like Hal. Let's not have a stalwart sort of typical DC hero. Let's go to what my mind was more of a Marvel style hero, which was the kind of the everyman Spider-Man model. So that you could put yourself in the lead character's shoes or stockings or gauntlets or whatever.
Or tight, right?
So I wanted to, to me, and I always liked Hal's character, but to me, Hal was a hero before he ever got the ring, right? Mm-hmm. He's a test pilot. He's Chuck Yeager. He's one of the Right Stuff guys. He's one of the Mercury 7, which, frankly, the Right Stuff is one of my favorite books and films. But I think I'm always more interested in the hero becoming the hero rather than already being the hero. So I wanted to have a bigger gulf between who that main character was as a person and who he needed to be as a hero. So Kyle is just a guy. He's just a guy. He's you or me or anybody else. What would you do in that situation if you get handed basically a magic ring? So that's where his character came from, and everything else that was built, the name and the heritage and all of that kind of stuff was built piece by piece as we started to put them together.
Gotcha. And now, one of the things that I've noticed is because we've been rereading the issues as we do the show every week, and toward the end of the previous writer's run, we noticed, and we've commented on this a lot, that it was really dense. There were walls of text, throughout this, and I noticed that once, and the book felt like an 80s book, or it felt like it didn't feel like a real modern book. And one of the things that we really noticed, or I really noticed going into like 51, is that the panels per page count went down, and it seemed a little more breezy, not as dense, it felt newer. It feels more like a modern comic, on reread. Is that something that you did just kind of on purpose, or was that just your style at that point?
No, it was just, I didn't go into it with that mindset. I just did what I did. I approached the book as I approach any book, really, whether it's then or now, which is to make it as visually enticing as possible, not be overly dense, unless there's a story reason for that, unless there's a specific beat in the story that I want to do, with it more dense verbiage or panel count or something like that. So it wasn't a plan. It's just what I do.
Gotcha.
And in particular for Green Lantern, I felt like it's basically a special effects book. Like one of the big allures of Green Lantern is, he made some cool shit with the ring. And that was very much part of the discussion, that we wanted to have the ring be making cool stuff, not boxing gloves. We had this great special effects aspect to the book, so let's lean into that. Let's do some really cool stuff, and let's make it as visual as possible so that the readers really respond to it.
Well, I thought that was brilliant that you made him like an artist, because that way, Daryl can go crazy on those constructs and everything. Yeah. I don't, that's like a chicken and egg thing. I don't know whether the idea was, we're going to have some cool ring constructs, so we should make him an artist, or the idea was, hey, I'd like to write him as an artist, so he would make cool ring constructs. It was probably half and half. But I, just in a very basic sense, I'm a big art fan. I love going to art museums, and my best friends in the business, to a great extent, are artists. I can't draw myself, but I'm always sort of enraptured by what artists can do. So I was like, let's lean into that. Let's have our main character have that aspect to him that I felt like I could write, because I was friends with some of the artists. Yeah, I mean, I love the character. I was in and out of Green Lantern until Emerald Twilight, and Kyle Rayner's my favorite Green Lantern. I mean, you pulled me in. I've basically been reading every month since Emerald Twilight, so on a personal level, thank you.
I'm glad you let us pick your pocket, Phil.
Hey, yeah.
Well, and as a Hal Jordan fan, I still stayed on the book. I was there with you, I think, until you probably left the book, like in the 120s. Was that it?
125 was my last one.
Yeah. So I stuck with you. I do have a bit of a question, because you're working at a time when the thaw between Marvel and DC was active. Things were warming up. And then they assigned you to work with a really cantankerous Silver Surfer writer on this crossover, right?
Yeah, that guy was pain in the ass to work with.
How did that kind of come about? I mean, that was company politics being good, and then
look, part of it was that was just the era. A lot of intercompany crossovers, Marvel and DC and Dark Horse. I wrote a bunch of them, so I know there were a bunch of different crossovers. It was not verboten at that point to sort of, cross your streams and put out a book that frankly everybody wants. Batman, Spider-Man, Batman, Daredevil, Superman, Silver Surfer. So it was just like, well, why? And I think I was still writing Surfer at the time. And I was like, well, why don't we do this one? Basically I was just feathering my own nest. And so, but both books were selling well. Both books were popular enough that you could sort of justify, well, let's put out a prestige volume that puts these characters together. It was a natural fit both with the characters and obviously with me writing both. And then partway through that story, Marvel versus DC became a reality. So the last page or two of Green Lantern Surfer is kind of a lead-in to Marvel versus DC. Although at the time, like, everybody was like, what the hell is this last page? Like, why is there a cardboard box in that? So in retrospect, I'm sure people that don't know one goes into the other are like, what the hell? But it just seemed to, it seemed to make sense.
Well, yeah, and you even slipped, I think, Wong, Doctor Strange's
when Kyle moved
assistant
to New York,
in Kyle's first move to New York, I think.
Are you saying that I put a Marvel character into a DC book?
I would never say that.
That obviously never happened.
Never happened.
I have no idea. I have no idea what you mean, particularly with Kyle's apartment on Bleecker Street in Greenwich Village.
I mean, is the reason they don't do the crossovers anymore? Is it too much of the corporations and stuff? Because I mean, that just seems like a license to print money, like the Marvel DC crossovers and stuff.
It's a license to print money, but it's
a
kind
hassle.
of couch cushion money compared to other media stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like when we were doing all of those crossovers, when we did Green Lantern Surfer and Marvel DC and Batman Aliens, Green Lantern Aliens, all of that stuff, it's just comics. It was just it was just comic books. Nobody, these were not multi-billion-dollar intellectual properties. They were just comics. In the ensuing time, obviously, all of that stuff has turned into literally multi-billion-dollar properties. Yeah. So there's a lot more money at stake. There's a lot more. The IP is a lot more closely guarded. So that was sort of, I'm very glad I was in the business at that point because I got to do a lot of those things. But that was kind of, to my mind, the last hurrah of Marvel and DC being able to coexist under the same covers. And to a great extent, they coexisted in New York, a few blocks from each other. Everybody knew everybody. People would move back and forth staff-wise at Marvel and DC. Marvel versus DC was edited by Mark Grunwald and Mike Carlin, who were like best friends. The ties between the companies were a lot stronger then too, on a personal level. Now, of course, Marvel's still in New York, but DC's out in Burbank. They're just a lot more separate, and there's a lot more money involved. So from the humble comics from which all this sprang, now stuff is worth too much money to actually play nicely together.
Yeah, if I can.
And look, I mean, it's if you have $1 billion property, you're not.
Oh yeah,
you're not probably willing to share it with anybody else either.
Yeah, if I traveled back in time and said, "Hey, there's going to be a several $100 million Eternals movie, in 2022, 2021," you would have me committed.
Yeah, put money down on that in Vegas.
I think he means more like they don't want to mess with that $1 billion Spider-Man, stuff like that. Yes,
I'd like odds on not one Ant-Man movie, but two of them,
and a third
coming. Yes,
and they're actually good.
Yes,
that's like $1 million to 1 payout right there. 20 years ago.
Well, I can't believe you didn't ask the question. So, was it your decision to turn Hal Jordan into Parallax, or was that a DC thing? Or
that was again baked into the Emerald Twilight notes, is that Hal was going to go into the Battery and come out as a bad guy, basically, or at least an antagonist. Daryl's the one that came up with the look for Parallax, and he's the one that came up with the name. We kicked around a bunch of different names for what Hal was going to be called, because obviously there was another dude going to be called Green Lantern, so he couldn't be called Green Lantern anymore. And we went through a lot of names, and Daryl's the one that suggested, what about Parallax? And this discussion stopped right there. We knew that was the one.
Well, it made for some, great tie like Parallax View. Perfect.
Yeah, I am not above swiping a title from a successful 1970s movie.
So, you were on Green Lantern for what, about let's see, 7 years? Is that about right?
7 years, yeah.
7 years. And at that time, you were also writing Silver Surfer, and then I think at that point, did you leave? And is that when you went to work for CrossGen at that point?
For a while, I was working for Marvel, DC, Wildstorm, which was Image at the time, and Valiant all at the same time.
Wow.
So I was dancing with all the girls at the party, and probably like when I was doing four books a month, I sort of got to the point where like, oh, this is too much. This is 1 foot across the line, because everybody has a different line where where you go, oh, I'm doing too much. That was mine. Like 3.5 books a month is probably right for me. 4 was a little much, because 3.5 allowed you to take on a little side project or a one shot or something like that. So I worked at DC and was on exclusive at DC like at the back end of the 90s for 3 years or something like that. I know I was exclusive at DC at the back end of the 90s because literally about a week after I had signed my DC exclusive, Dark Horse came to me and said, "Do you want to launch the Star Wars monthly book for us?" So after I ran out in front of a bus, I had to turn down that gig because I had just signed an exclusive.
Wow.
Obviously, it all worked out fine. I went, afterwards, I went and did a bunch of Star Wars stuff at Dark Horse, and having been 11 years old in 1977, that is my sweet spot. But early 2000, I went to CrossGen. I got an offer that was too good to refuse, and finished up with issue 125 on Green Lantern, and some other odds and ends, and then was on staff at CrossGen for like 2.5 years.
Now that was I'm sorry, I've got to go way back on here, but if I remember right, that was like a bullpen situation. Everybody that worked for CrossGen moved to Florida. Is that right?
Yeah, generally. I mean, we had fill-in artists who, you didn't have to move to Florida to draw two
to be
issues.
A fill-in.
But yeah, the concept behind it was, let's have the Marvel bullpen. And then we had to explain to the boss, we had to explain to Mark Alessi, who was a huge comic fan and particularly a huge like Marvel in the 60s fan. And we were like, that didn't actually exist. Like there was no Marvel bullpen. Like, Jazzy John and the King didn't have their art boards set up next to each other. Everybody lived on Long Island. So I remember when we told him that, he was like, "Oh, really?" But the concept of having everybody in the office, just like if you went to work for Disney Animation or Warner Brothers Animation, or there was an office where you went and did your work. That's what CrossGen was. It was unusual because that's generally or almost never how comics are done. But that was the paradigm for this, which is frankly a very expensive way to make comics. Like we were all on salary and we were all getting paid pretty well to come into the office and make comics. So in that respect, it was kind of cool. You got sick days and vacation and 401k and all the things that actual adults get at their job. Business wise, it ultimately wasn't a success. But creatively, I enjoyed everything that I worked on. Look, no job is perfect, and there were annoyances and pitfalls and all that stuff. But I look back on a lot of that material. I'm very fond of it.
Yeah, I particularly remember getting Sojourn at the time. Loved that book. It was really, really awesome.
Well, Sojourn came out of Sojourn. I think maybe Sojourn was like the 6th monthly we put out. And because when I went in, I got my pick of. There were 4 concepts already, so I picked Mystic and Scion, and picked my art teams on those. And then the first was the 5th title, and that was much more, sort of gods, and sort of a lot of it pulled from Zelazny's Amber Chronicles. And then when we needed another book, I eventually said, well, Fellowship of the Ring is coming out next year. We need to do a fantasy book because that will be successful. Now, the truth of it is we needed to do a fantasy book because I wanted to do a fantasy book. I wanted to get my, Tolkien and Terry Brooks and Robert E. Howard out. So they said, the boss said, okay. And I went into my office for like 3 days and just made the whole thing up. The characters, situations, the map, and all of that stuff. And came back out and I said, this is what we're doing. They went, okay, put a dog in it. And all right, put a dog in it.
I like dogs.
Yeah, you'll hear my dogs bark at some point. So yeah, I mean, the only sort of input from somebody else on Sojourn was put a dog in it. So we did that, and then Greg Land was actually coming into the studio, and he was supposed to draw Meridian, and he was not real jazzed to draw Meridian, and it was kind of not like his style book anyway. So we had a few meetings, and eventually Greg was moved over to Sojourn, and he designed all the characters, and we were a team for a couple of years.
Wow.
Will's just picking your brain because he does his own comic stuff through Kickstarter, so I think he's just looking for tips.
Comics are hard and expensive. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I actually teach a comic writing class at Jacob Kruger Studio in Manhattan. Although obviously we do it all online now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys heard there's a pandemic.
Yeah,
but I tell everybody in the class, look, comics are the hardest thing you can write. Comics are harder than screenplays, harder than TV, harder than drama, harder than novels or journalism. The skill set required to write comics and do it well requires you to wear a lot of different hats and do a lot of things, do a lot of different things well. So yeah, comics are hard. And the writing part of it is the easy part of the creative chain. Like it's the hardest writing you can do, but the guy next to you who's drawing the thing has a harder job.
Yeah. You can spend, an hour on a page or 2 hours on a page, writing it and then hand it off. And then that artist lives with it for, a day or 2 days or a week, depending on, what the scheduling is. You're right. It's the easiest part of the process, but yeah, it's still hard.
Yeah, I mean pages 2 and 3, double page spread.
Yeah.
The Mongol horde mounted on horses comes over the hill, 1,000 warriors into the distance, and then I'm done.
Yeah,
like I'm done.
Here, go draw this.
I go on to page 4, and a week later, the artist is still squeezing blood.
Yeah, and cursing your name with every line.
I was going to say, as the only man.
In fact, I just did a podcast with Ron Lim last night, and I apologized to him for something that's in the 5th issue of Surfer Rebirth. I was like, I know you'll do it, but I felt bad when I wrote it. So,
well, it's awesome that you mentioned that because we haven't talked about the Silver Surfer yet, and you had a long run on the Silver Surfer with Ron Lim as the artist, who, speaking as a Silver Surfer reader at the time, Ron Lim is, John Buscema is awesome. Don't get me wrong. Jack Kirby, created the character, but my Surfer is Ron Lim's Surfer. That's just who he is.
Oh, that's 90s Surfer. Yeah, you say, show me a picture of 90s Silver Surfer. It's Ron Lim. Yeah,
it's Ron Lim. Yeah,
he was the first artist I ever worked with.
Oh wow.
My first script ever was a Silver Surfer script, and the first script I ever wrote was drawn by Ron Lim. So,
Nice.
So this is completely full circle for me.
I mean, I guess it's safe to assume, because your Green Lantern and your Silver Surfer stuff was so good, that you love the cosmic, writing that cosmic stuff.
Not in particular.
Oh.
I mean, I don't dislike it, but those were just the opportunities that were in front of me.
But it's not like your favorite genre of the comics, or
no, not really. I don't know that I in particular have a favorite genre of comics. If I had to pick one, it would probably be historical. I'd rather do something set in the past than something set in the far-flung future. But I like all of them. They all allow you to flex different muscles, and I don't want to just tell superhero stories. I don't want to just tell cosmic superhero stories. I'd like that to be a dish on the smorgasbord. But the example I always give is, like, I love pizza, but I don't want to have pizza every day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe that's not true.
Pizza is good. Burritos, maybe?
I think so. Literally this week I have Silver Surfer Rebirth issue coming out.
Yep.
Obviously, cosmic superheroes. I have issue 4 of Almost American from Aftershock, which is real life contemporary espionage story, and I have Swamp God single issue from Heavy Metal, which is historical horror set during the Civil War. So hopefully that's a fairly disparate selection, and I don't really like any of them better than another. I just, I like being able to do different things and flex different muscles.
Still dancing with all the girls.
Are there any particular genres that you've not done yet that you really want to give a try? Or
I've been fortunate enough to do most of them, frankly. I haven't done a detective noir sort of story. I've done a Daredevil story. I've done some stuff like that, but nothing, nothing that would fall under the kind of noir crime category. Although I actually found I take that back. Two things. I did some stories for the anthology, The Ride, from 12 Gauge Press. So I have actually done some noir stuff, because those are basically crime stories, and I love doing them. But I actually found an old pitch from 2004 when I was looking for a contract the other day in my files, and I had completely forgotten about it. And I found this old pitch that had been sort of misfiled, and I went, "Oh shit, this is actually pretty good." So I might get my noir crime story itch scratched at some point this year.
Very
nice.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, are there? I mean, you've worked with Ron Lim. You've worked with Daryl Banks. You've worked with lots and lots of artists. Are there any kind of whales out there that you've not worked with that you would just love to? That
oh yeah, I mean, that's a list as long as your arm.
Bucket list, yeah.
both people that have been working in the business for 25 years and people that are just coming into the business. That to me is the most exciting aspect of this job, is that you get to work with and collaborate. The artist brings your story to life, so you get to collaborate with this whole range of incredibly talented people. So yeah, there's new artists, there are old artists, and everything in between. That you sort of go back to the people that that you've clicked with: Ron Lim, Daryl Banks, Rick Leonardi, Bart Sears. But you're always looking for somebody new and different, because you end up creating something that neither of you could have done by yourselves.
Absolutely.
So the Silver Surfer Rebirth, issue 1's coming out tomorrow. Was that you pitching the Marvel, or did they come to you and say, "Hey, do you want to tell another Silver Surfer story set back in in the continuity when you were writing?"
Yeah, Marvel came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to do this if we can get Ron Lim?" And I guess they went to Ron and said, "Hey, do you want to do this if we can get Ron Marz?" It sounds like some sort of Tom Sawyer story.
Ron and Ron.
Get your, if you do this, but I don't think it was, it wasn't like they didn't have to put the hard sell on at all. We were both like, "Oh yeah, we'll come back and do that." And honestly, I had been, for a while now, I'd been feeling like, well, I think I'd like to go back and do that again. Just because, this was 30 years ago for me and Ron. And I think we're probably both better at what we do now than we were then. But also just sometimes you have to step away from a character for a while. Because when I left Surfer after 50 some issues, and I kind of felt like, all right, I'm done. I don't really have more Surfer stories that I need to tell right now. So I made the decision to step away from the book because I just felt like the well was dry, and I didn't want to keep going back to it and not doing the best work I could do. But you step away from something for a while, and then eventually you kind of go, oh yeah, I remember why I like doing that, and now I've got the well isn't empty anymore. I've got some buckets that I can dip in there and start drawing water again. And
you get to work with obscure characters like no one's ever heard of, like Thanos.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not stupid. I might be dumb, but I'm not stupid. I'm not gonna go write a Surfer story and not have Thanos show up.
Hey, it sells, and I'm excited for Marvel. That whole thing. I love him. I love his son. That whole, I love this guy.
I thought we might keep that a little bit, sort of under wraps and surprise people in the first issue. But then I saw the cover and I went, I guess we're not keeping that under wraps.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought that was like splashed pretty much on every comics website. Yeah, I sort of remember seeing that.
So there will, Marvel's in it, Legacy's in it. Legacy was actually a request from the editor. Like, can we get him in there somewhere? So we actually talked about a list of characters that would be kind of cool to show up in this. And so talked about characters, and I talked to Ron about who he'd want to draw, and then kind of built the story around, okay, how can all of this sort of be in a daisy chain of events that allows us to build a story around it.
Well, you're probably staring right now at the ultimate Quasar fanboys, I think. Is that fair to say, Phil?
I think so. Yeah, I was about to. Yeah. Wendell Vaughn was about to spill out of my mouth. Yes, we would consider it a personal favor if you could work him in there somewhere. Or something
and
else
actually,
soon.
You do have a connection to that because you, I think, wrote the only issue of the series that Mark Grunwald didn't write of the original series.
Yeah, and I felt like shit about it too. Thanks for bringing it up, Will.
Sorry about that.
Well, I had been, I was like, I was down at the Marvel office, kind of hanging around, and seeing editors, going out to lunch, and the normal thing that freelancers did. And I guess I was in the office of the editor who eventually was my editor on Thor, and he said, "Hey, do you want to do a Quasar fill-in issue just so we got something in the drawer?" And I was, at that point, I was very early in my career, and I was happy for any work that came my way. And I said, "Sure, what do you want?" And they said, we don't care." Like, so obviously, I was like, "Well, and you're going to get a Thanos story." So I wrote the issue. It was drawn, and it sat in the drawer for a year or two.
Oh, wow!
And then when it was decided, when the market sort of the bottom dropped out of the market. Marvel decided, well, Quasar is going to end with issue 60. Mm-hmm. So they stuck my issue in so that it didn't just go to waste. They stuck my issue in as issue 59.
Mm-hmm. We know. We before we did this Green Lantern podcast, we did a Quasar podcast. Yes, we covered that whole Mark Grunwald series. Yes.
Well, I heard through the grapevine because Mark Grunwald, who was the writer of Quasar, all except for that one issue. I heard that Mark was kind of bummed out that he didn't have an unbroken run of 60 issues. And when I heard that through the grapevine, I was like, oh, God.
Well, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault.
Not my fault, but I still felt bad about it because Mark was a great guy and I was friends with him, and I didn't really know how to address it. But I believe at some point I did go to him and say, "Hey, look, man, I'm sorry. I didn't know that this is how the situation would unfold." And he was very kind and very generous about it, but I still felt bad about it.
Yeah, I think that question, if you could, talk or interview someone, alive or dead, who would it be? I think mine is always like, oh, I'd talk to Mark Grunwald. I just wish, that I'd ever, even just personally, would have ever had a chance to talk to him.
Yeah, Mark was a great dude. I
loved his work.
I don't know that I've ever met anybody who loves comics more than Mark Grunwald loved comics.
You could tell just from his work. I loved his Quasar, his Captain America. Just.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the man put his ashes
in a comic,
yes. in the trade paperback of Squadron Supreme. So yeah,
there's no better place, frankly.
Yeah, I mean Squadron is great. I have this deep abiding love for Quasar. I mean, that series was just it hit me at the right time, I guess, because 30 years later, I still love it. So
well, I think those sort of side characters where you discover early in their career and early in your career as a comics reader, that stuff sticks with you. For me, it was Nova. When I was a little kid, Nova had just debuted, so I think I got maybe issue 4 or 5 off a spinner rack in the supermarket as a kid, and man, I thought Nova was the coolest thing ever. Now, looking back, you go, oh, well, Nova's just like Spider-Man and Green Lantern smashed together. Which, of course, has no bearing on the sort of Green Lantern that I created in any way, shape, or form. But there is something to that, that sort of ground floor hero that you discover at just the right age, the golden age of science fiction, right, which is like 10.
Yeah, exactly.
And because I look, and I totally get it, because I look at, stuff being reinvigorated like Sleepwalker or Darkhawk, which were books that started just about the time that I started in the business, right? So like those books have no meaning to me whatsoever. I looked, I looked down my nose at that stuff when they were coming out, because I was like, oh Jesus, Darkhawk, come on. But I know that people have a deep and abiding love for those characters because they discovered them at just the right age. So I'm fond of saying, well, my nostalgia is awesome. Your nostalgia is stupid. And everybody has that same view of it. Like Ninja Turtles and Transformers mean absolutely nothing to me because I was too old by the time they got introduced. So on the one hand, like when I see grown ass adults going, "Oh my God, did you see the new He-Man figures?" I'm like, "What, are you kidding me?" But on the other hand, I get it. Like, oh, there's a new Black Series Star Wars figure. I got to go get that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking a little bit about your nostalgia. What's your comics DNA? I mean, you mentioned Nova a little bit. What really kind of pulled you in and grabbed you and said, oh, this is what I'm going to do because of this? Was it anything in particular? Was it just kind of an accretion of things, or
accretion? That's a good word. Normally get accretion in the podcast.
Sorry.
Good deal.
I am educated, so I'm sorry.
I read, like, as a kid, I read, Nova because I thought it was new and exciting, but also Claremont and Byrne X-Men and Avengers right in that area, in that era, which was George Perez and John Byrne, Jim Shooter, David McElhaney, all of that stuff, and from like issue 150 to 180 or so. So that was the stuff that I was excited about as a kid, and then outgrew comics because I was a mature individual of 11 or 12 or something like that. But read Planet of the Apes magazines and Savage Sword of Conan, and then Epic Illustrated. Epic Illustrated was totally my thing when I was a kid, and eventually even lost interest in those and did not come back to comics until like my senior year of high school. And so that was the 80s. And that was Simonson Thor, Miller Daredevil, Byrne FF. So all of that sort of foundational stuff, really. And I got just sucked right in because all of that stuff was so good. Eventually, Wolfman and Perez Titans as well. Don Newton drawing Batman. So I had a core of titles that I was reading, and then discovered that there was such a thing as a comic store, because I didn't know that.
It changes everything, doesn't it?
So then I discovered stuff like Nexus and American Flag, and more indie stuff, and then like 1986 came, and you're doing Watchmen and Dark Knight, and that's when kind of the light bulb went off. It was like, oh my god, this is not what it used to be. This is now, and I was thoroughly entertained by just regular superhero comics, but when those two came out, along with Frank Miller's Ronin having come out the year before, I was just completely enthralled. And then, like 4 years later, I was writing them.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. The 80s were just this 80s Marvel, Simonson, Byrne, Miller. It just had this seismic effect, I think, on the industry. I mean, we're still feeling it today. I mean,
that's my nostalgia stuff. That's my stuff that made a huge impression on me at just the right time. So, like, Simonson's Thor is still my favorite run ever, along with Miller's Daredevil, and the Wolfman Perez Titans. Those are kind of the three-legged stool for me, along with some other stuff. But those three big superhero titles were the ones that really just, I had to get the next issue every month.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm maybe just a couple years younger than you at this point. So yeah, I was hitting about some of those same things at the same time. So yeah, definitely those. I love me those omnibuses because I can go back to Claremont's.
There's way too many of those floating around on the shelves back there.
Pick them up and hey, here's Simonson's Thor. I'm going to just reread the whole thing right here. Thunk. It's pretty awesome.
Okay, so I'm going to pick something up that you kind of threw down, Ron. You said for the Silver Surfer Rebirth, they would kind of editorial ask you to put. Did they tell you to do both Marvel and Genus or just Genus? Because Genus is showing up in the Captain Marvel book right now. So with Carol Danvers,
they asked for Legacy.
Yeah.
Knowing that Ron and I had created them too.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I was just like, well, fuck it, I'm going to put Captain Marvel in there too. And so, but I mean, these weren't like you have to put these characters into the book. It was just kind of some suggestions from editorial as to which characters, like, oh, this would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like we need these. It was like here's something that would be cool. What do you think? So there are a few of those in the series, couple of which have not been revealed yet. So I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
So basically, it was just like, here's the toys you can play with.
Well, here's toys you can play with if you want. Nice. But if you want other toys, they're around for you as well. Frankly, there were, like for a while, Gladiator was going to be in the book because I love Gladiator. He's just that mohawk. The costume, and basically he's Superman. So
yeah, big purple Superman. Yeah.
So, and I take any chance I can to write Superman, even if he's an alien with a mohawk. But I think we came up with a better character to fill that role in the series.
Well, I mean, okay, so you're talking about Gladiator. Are there characters for any property out there that you've not had a chance to write yet that you would just like, I'm gone, I'm doing it, it's on?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's I've never, and I've been blessed to have written, basically everybody at Marvel or DC in some sort of crossover, Marvel versus DC or All Access or something, guest star. So I've written the vast majority at least once somewhere. I've never written. I don't think I've ever written Deadman or Dr. Fate. Although I got to write Doctor Strange Fate, so I get like half credit for that. So I don't think I've gotten to do those. And I'd like to write a Star Trek story. I've gotten to write Star Wars and Conan and a bunch of that stuff. a bunch of Aliens, Predator, but I've never gotten to write a Star Trek story, and so I would like to scratch my original Trek itch.
Nice.
So original Trek.
Boom. IDW owns it. You hear that, IDW? Give the man a call.
And the other one that I always say is Tarzan, which I've written at times. I wrote him in a crossover with Batman, but I grew up on the Edgar Rice Burroughs novels, and I would love to have like an actual run on a Tarzan comic.
Oh, that's cool.
I don't know how likely that is because there isn't a Tarzan comic. There's sporadic releases from Dynamite and Dark Horse, but no real not like when I was a kid and there was there was Joe Kubert Tarzan coming from DC, and then John Buscema Tarzan coming from Marvel. And even before that, all of the Russ Manning Tarzan stuff from Dell, which I discovered in our basement as a kid. My brother had some of those comics. My older brother cast aside in a cardboard box in the basement. There were some Tarzan books down there too, which I was just fascinated the hell out of me because I had watched Tarzan faithfully on the Sunday morning movie out of New York City, Channel 2.
And I know it's probably cliche, but you said you like the detective noir stuff. Like, would you be interested in writing like Batman in some way, shape, or form, like on a regular basis? Because I love Detective Batman. Him doing detective work. Solving mystery. Step by step and stuff.
If anybody tells you they're not interested in writing Batman, they're lying.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. I'm like that's the rumor. Like
everybody has a Batman.
Every
story.
comic book writer has a Batman story in the back of their head. So that's true.
And I've been fortunate to enough to write Batman a number of times, both in groups and in some stories that were Batman solo stories. When we did Andy Lanning and I did the Endless Winter crossover at DC last year, or 2020, end of 2020. Just Batman showing up in the Justice League issues was just like every time I did, Batman has to be the coolest character on the page. And I think we did that mostly. So yeah, Batman's just, to me, Batman and Superman are the twin icons. There's nothing better. They are, sort of fictional icons, probably the biggest fictional icons of the 20th century. I don't think there are any characters that are better known or have a wider reach.
Yeah, because Mark Waid's about the reboot, the Batman Superman books. Would that be like your dream job, writing Batman and Superman monthly?
Oh yeah, I love that. Oh, I totally love that dynamic. And I'm really looking forward to that book because I know Mark loves those characters and hasn't had an opportunity to write them in a long time. So, that's definitely a bucket list kind of thing. Those two characters together to me are just, I would happily do that for the rest of my life because I love the dynamic between the two of them because they're in many ways two sides of the same coin.
The world's finest.
Superman is who he is because he was raised by loving parents. And Batman is who he is because he lost his parents.
So if any of these writers say they don't want to write Batman, they're lying. Okay.
Yeah, totally.
We'll have to call them on that. We want to be respectful of your time.
Oh yeah.
So let's go ahead and plug Silver Surfer Rebirth #1 will be out in finer comic shops everywhere tomorrow, right?
Well, let him plug the 20 books he has coming out tomorrow, Will.
Oh yeah, and the rest of your books too.
There's Surfer, which I don't have my comps of yet. They'll eventually show up. So there's Surfer Rebirth 1. There's this is Heavy Metal's Elements line. So this is Swamp God issue 3. This is material that's also appeared in the Heavy Metal magazine. This is bloody goodness, frankly. There's some rough stuff in there, and we can actually do an unboxing.
Ooh.
So my comps for Almost American number 4 just showed up. That will be in stores tomorrow as well. And let's see, this is how your comps show up, boys and girls. And there's issue 4 of Almost American, which is actually a real life story. This is the story of 2 Russian intelligence operatives who fled Russia and ended up in the United States, and this is the real story of what happened to them.
Oh, cool.
So tomorrow you get cosmic adventure and real life espionage and historical horror. One-stop shopping from me.
Nice.
And any social media, websites, anything you want to plug? People can find you or sign up for the class.
Let's see. Social media, I'm at Ron Marz on Twitter. My website is ronmarz.com, which, if all goes well, will be relaunching tomorrow with a new design and new content and all that stuff. Or at least some a new design and some new content. We're building it. But there's going to be some new cool stuff up there. And let's see, there's an Instagram account for me and a Facebook account for me, although I don't really pay much attention to them. My teaching gig is at the Jacob Kruger Studio in New York City, and I teach a 4-week comic book writing class. I also do a workshop that's full right now, but they're looking at starting another one where we help everybody in the workshop. There's a total of 8 people in the workshop, and everybody brings their material and we work with it. And then I do one-on-one consultations with the school too. And that's writeyourscreenplay.com. And I'm working on a video game too, but I don't usually mention the video game because we're with comics, you are, it's like 5 or 6 of your closest friends, and you make this thing, and 2 months later, it's out in the world. With video games, it's you and 600 of your closest friends, and you work on it for 2 years or 3 years, and then it comes out into the world.
Wow!
So I love all of the stuff that I'm doing. It's all
awesome.
It's all terrific. I get to stretch different muscles, and I'm very thankful that, these are, I'm very fortunate to be where I am, and to have been doing this for 30 plus years.
All right.
I actually just thought of a question, Phil, that I forgot to ask.
Okay.
So you actually came back to Green Lantern
at the
end of this run. And I was curious, at that point, did they know that they were going to cancel it at 181 and they wanted you to finish it out? Or okay.
Yeah, they. I had left CrossGen. The ill winds were blowing there, shall we say? It was very obvious where things were headed. So I decided, well, I think I'm done here. And I finished up a few issues, which I never got paid for, actually. And parted on good terms. Some people stayed, some people left. When I got home that evening, having left the office and decided, well, I'll finish off these issues for you and you can pay me freelance, but I'm not on staff anymore. I'm not coming back, because it was obvious that things were not going to work out. I got calls from, because word spread pretty quickly. I got calls from Top Cow to come play with some of their toys, and Dark Horse to do Star Wars. And a day or two later, DC called and said, you have friends here. We'll look out for you. And then I ended up with Green Lantern, the sort of coda issues of Green Lantern, because they knew that at that point that they were going to cancel it with 181 and relaunch with Rebirth. Everything revolves around Rebirth, apparently.
In one way or another, right?
Will's heart, yes.
So obviously I took the Green Lantern gig, and I was able to bring Luke Ross with me, who had been working at CrossGen, had spent time in the studio, and we got to be friends. And Luke had called me not long before that, and said, I don't know what to do. They keep asking me for pages, and they haven't paid me for anything in a long time. And I was like, well, how much do they owe you? And he said $34,000. And I fell out of my chair.
Oh, wow.
I was
that's
like,
19. That's $2,000, not $22.
Yeah, I mean, look, CrossGen paid good rates. I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't like they were. It wasn't like they had squeezed them down on the rates. They were paying them good rates, but the coffers were empty. There was no more money left. So I was like, for God's sakes,
stop.
Put the pencil down. Don't draw any more pages. And then I said, let me see what I can do and try to help you. And then DC called. Maybe they had called the day before, maybe they called the day after. But when they said, "Do you want to come back for Green Lantern?" I said, "Yeah, I do. But can I bring Luke Ross with me because he needs a gig?" So Luke and I went and did those 6 Green Lantern issues, and then we went over to Dark Horse and did the Samurai Heaven and Earth series that we did over there. And then Luke went to Marvel and did a bunch of Star Wars stuff. So it all worked out.
Cool. Very cool.
All right. So yeah, Will, if you don't have any more questions, let's let this man get back to work, because obviously he's doing nothing right now.
Yeah,
so
I've got some pages to write tonight. Haircut tomorrow morning. Right? So I got pages tomorrow night.
But yes, thank you so much. I know now we really know how valuable your time is. Thank you very much for sharing it with us.
No problem, guys. I'm very happy to do it. We'll do it again at some point.
Yes, definitely. We'll reach out again. Thank you, sir.
Yep. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Awesomeness.
That was cool, man.
Yes.
That was really cool.
Got some answers to some of our questions, about Emerald Twilight and everything else. So. Hey, look, we're only a little over an hour. Hey, this time we had a reason to be.
Yeah, and we have 60 more of his issues to go as we work through the series.
Yes, that's true. Hey, once I was looking at the schedule, once we get past like the Guy Gardner and the Dark Star stuff, man, it flies. So
awesome. Well, yeah, I am. Good job, man.
Hey, thank you. Again, I really never read CrossGen, so I mean, I would have missed that whole thing. So yes, good job, sir.
And yeah, it's I hadn't realized that he had some books coming out from like Aftershock, which is one of the indie publishers that I'm kind of familiar with, and Heavy Metal. That's pretty awesome.
I mean, I love. Yeah, I mean, I love
Silver
having these people. Yeah, I mean, I love having these people on, but yeah, I love trying to get the word out for them. When they do stuff that's not Marvel or DC.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But yeah, definitely.
Very cool.
I'm definitely picking up Silver Surfer tomorrow.
It's coming. It's coming.
He said there's even a few more surprise characters. Come on, Quasar. Come on, Quasar.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed for Quasar.
I know. I just hope that when we mentioned Quasar, he wasn't like, damn it, they're gonna guess it. I hope that's the case. All right, so hold on. I was gonna say let's get out of here, but first I will tell everyone what we're gonna do next week. Pretty sure I remember because it was what we were going to do this week before we got Ron Marz.
It's going to be hard to equal this, right?
I know. Matt Kona, we need you back.
Hey, we should probably try to get Daryl Banks on too one of these days.
Oh, yes. Or next time we get Ron Marz, say, hey, bring Daryl Banks with you. All right, kids. So yes, because next week we're going to do like just what we told you last week, Green Lantern 66 and 67, the first Kyle Rayner, Wally West team up, the annual number 4, Green Lantern annual 4, and Superman 105. So, but it's all Kyle Rayner. So, although Hal might show up in there somewhere.
Sure, he probably does.
The annual. Yes. All right. So, see what you can't blame him for Parallax, Will. That was kind of.
I've never blamed him. For
I know that was part of the package. Hey, you get to do this dream gig, but hey, you gotta.
But you got to do this.
Got to tear down Hal Jordan. Yeah.
Well, and I I get, he has this great love of Nova because it hit him at the right time. I mean, Green Lantern's that for me. Hal Jordan. It's like the first comic I remember picking up when I was a wee lad, many years ago. And so I get it.
Oh yeah. Oh, the other night Lilith and I talked to. It's already up on YouTube. By the time you hear this on the podcast, both parts will be out because part one's going to be on Capes Lunatics, the other part's Capes Lunatics Sidekicks. Sunday night we talked to Jerry Conway. I was like, oh my god, I thought I was nervous for Ron Marz. Jerry Conway. I was like, oh my god.
Oh, and I because of last night, I have to have a shout out to a certain special someone.
Ooh,
Ray.
Oh, the Moon Knight trailer.
I'm
yes.
so happy for you.
That's right. Yes.
The Moon Knight trailer dropped last night, and it was pretty awesome.
Whoa, that's pretty damn big.
I know. I can't wait for that myself.
Yeah, I've been watching his feeds today, and he's just like, I can just imagine him just almost like vibrating because it's so awesome.
Oh my god, you go to that Into the Night fan group, there's a bunch of new people saying, hey, where should I start reading Moon Knight?
Yeah.
But no, did you see, I guess they're going to, you've probably seen those Black, White, and Blood, they're like 5-issue, like anthology series. I think Carnage got one, Wolverine got one, Deadpool got one, Elektra has one now, but now they're doing a Moon Knight one, so probably for at least 5 months, Moon Knight's going to have 2 books a month.
Oh, wow.
And he's showing up in Devil's Reign, the big event right now. So,
very cool.
So,
very cool. But I just wanted to say,
heaven.
Congrats, Ray.
It was just a really nice package.
Oh my god! And we just talked Batman with Ron Marz. All I could hear is,
I love Batman.
All right. So yes. Nice. All right, kids. So send us your thoughts on the upcoming Green Lantern stuff. Or, hey, are you a creator? Do you want to talk to us? I do plenty of shows. We'll squeeze you in somewhere. Email us, capesandlunatics@gmail.com. Or call the voicemail, 614-382-2737. That's 614-38-CAPES. And remember, you can follow Sector 2814 on Facebook, on Twitter. Find the Green Lantern fan group on Facebook. Find links to all the various social medias for all the Marvel and DC shows we do. Links to this YouTube channel. You can see Ron Marz in person, kind of recorded on the YouTube channel. And Jerry
the magic
Conway.
Of the internet.
Yes, Ron Marz, Jerry Conway, and many more. Yes, on the YouTube channel. And most importantly, if you can, please subscribe to the Patreon. Once again, we're holding this down ourselves, paying for it out of pocket. $3 to $5 gets you creative stuff with certain creator interviews. Mr. D.G. Chichester talks to me and Lilith every month about one of his works. And superhero movie brackets are about to begin. By the time you hear this, they might have already begun. Because, Will, if you want in this weekend, our first match is going to be the Howard the Duck movie versus the 1990 Captain America movie.
Ugh.
Well, we're going for the worst, Will. I mean, this ain't going to be Shakespeare.
Wow.
It's battle for the worst, Will. Come on.
You've got some strong contenders there.
What, you don't love the Italian Red Skull? Come on. All right, kids. So, if you can, please subscribe to the Patreon or get yourself some Capes and Lunatics and Capes and Lunatics Sidekicks merch. Find everything at Linktree, linktr.ee/Capes and Lunatics. And also, while you're online, remember, please help support the patron saint of Sector 2814, Mr. Matt Kona. Find him everywhere on social media at Matt Kona, MATTKONA.
Sparkly quantum tentacles.
The yin to Darkhawk's yang.
And then when he mentioned Darkhawk, that's all I heard.
The yin to Darkhawk's yang.
Slow down. We need this for drops. Suck it, Lilith. See you later, bunkies.
All right, Will, another comic book creator. Where can people find you and all your stuff?
You can find me at Wallred. That's at WALLRED on Gmail and Twitter and Facebook. If you want, you can also find my self-published work, Crossover Division, via Kickstarter. Number 3 was just funded, and we will be getting it printed very shortly, I hope.
I run to my mailbox every day, hoping it's going to be in there.
It's going to be a little while.
I know.
Also, Diary of Night at diaryofnight.com. And, we had a little Quasar conversation here. So if you want to find out more about Quasar, you can always go to the Quantum Zone at quantumzone.org.
That's right.
5 inches, maybe.
I'll put it in my navel.
Hey, boys, you look at the party? I love the party.
And if you're wondering about that Quantum Zone Quasar podcast we mentioned, yes, it's on this. Well, it'll be on this feed for the podcast, or easiest way, just go to the YouTube channel. There's a playlist. You can just play them back to back to back. There's 152 episodes, so.
And only 60 issues of Quasar. So there you go.
Well, we threw in the Avengers and stuff too. Yeah. So
all his appearances. I mean, we pretty much hit almost every appearance. It was a lot of fun.
Oh my God. That's what the homework we should have gave Conan when he left the country would have been like, hey, on your plane flight over and then the plane flight back, tell us how many Quantum Zone episodes you can get through. Yeah, kids.
Wow.
Yeah, kids. I mean, think about it. Each episode's probably like around an hour. That's probably like close to 152 hours.
Well, I think there were 1 or 2 where we went close to like 2. I mean, there were some pretty
there were some longer ones. There's probably there's probably a few shorter ones. So it probably evens out. But yeah, so yes, kids.
I don't think we ever had an episode quite where we were just like Guy Gardner, Warrior, and Dark Stars, and Teen Titans. And...
Not even the what was that, Pie Will?
Okay, I was wrong.
Okay.
Not the Doom Cupcake.
I was gonna say maybe not the regular Quasar series, but some of those Avengers issues.
Yeah, okay. I take that back. You're right.
And what about that? Wrong. Remember that? What was that? The collection obsession with the poop people. The one like Ray loved and we hated. Remember that?
That wasn't as bad as I remember it. Okay.
I know. I mean, but Ray raved about it. I'm like, we're like, okay, it's here, and Ray is just like, ooh,
look how big it is.
Good times.
Yes. All right, let's get out of here. People are like, shut up already. All right, kids. Again, we can't talk this week, so yeah, but still, come back next week. Green Lantern 66 and 67, Green Lantern Annual 4, and Superman 105. Again, all Kyle Rayner stuff. Parallax is in there somewhere. The Flash is in there. Again, no Guy Gardner, no Dark Stars this next week. So, hey man, we hit you with a bunch of Guy Gardner and Dark Star crossovers. So, a couple weeks, and we gave you Ron Marz.
Yeah, that's right.
Not that we did that for ourselves or anything, but yeah.
No, that's totally completely selfless.
That's right. Selfless. All right, kids, come back next week. And remember, go buy them Silver Surfer issues. Come on.
That's right.